Before Paul Ryan, there was Newt Gingrich. In 1995, then House Speaker Newt Gingrich wanted to voucherize Medicare. He wanted to privatize it. As the LA Times reported back then, Gingrich predicted that Congress would undertake a major reform of Medicare. One alternative would be a voucher program in which beneficiaries would choose among several competing private health plans. So Medicare goes away, grandma gets a coupon and a prayer and a visit to the private insurance market. Before Paul Ryan ever proposed getting rid of Medicare that way, Newt Gingrich did it in 1995. And that is an underappreciated part of why we got 4 more years of President Bill Clinton in 1996. The president tied Newt Gingrich and his voucher Medicare stuff like a lead weight to Bob Dole's neck in the 96 election.
Against Medicare again, Dole Gingrich tried to cut $270 billion. Bob Dole, wrong in the past, wrong for our future.
See, Dole Gingrich then, Romney Ryan this year. That's what the Democrats were going to do anyway. Now it's a lot easier. Bill Clinton won a second term in 1996, so of course. Another poster child for privatizing the social safety net, of course, is this guy.
You asked, do I feel free? Let me put it to you this way. I earned capital in the campaign, political capital, and now I intend to spend it. It is my style, and I'm going to spend it for what I told the people I'd spend it on, which is, you've heard the agenda, Social Security and tax reform, moving this economy forward.
President Bush, after winning re-election in 2004, declaring his election a mandate, vowing to push through privatizing Social Security. The country not only said no to that, the country threw up a little bit in their mouth as they said no to it. The more Bush talked about privatizing Social Security, the less popular it got. And then Republicans paid for it at the polls. While that was underway, it was Congressman Paul Ryan who was pushing an even more radical version of Social Security privatization in the House of Representatives. Paul Ryan's Social Security Personal Savings Guarantee and Prosperity Act of 2005 was an even more radical version of Bush's privatization of Social Security. Privatizing Social Security went nowhere in the mid-90s. In the mid-2000s. But Paul Ryan managed to keep his seat in the House through the great Republican congressional purges that followed this era in 2006 and 2008. Paul Ryan also kept the idea of privatizing Social Security and Medicare alive. In 2008, with his Roadmap for America's Future, Paul Ryan resurrected the old Newt Gingrich plan to kill Medicare by privatizing it and replacing it with vouchers. He also called for privatizing Social Security. That was 2008. In 2010, Paul Ryan tried again, a new version of his roadmap and a splashy new website to launch it. Guess what was still in the plan? A Medicare overhaul that the Wall Street Journal, of all papers, accused of essentially ending Medicare as we know it, privatizing Medicare, replacing it with vouchers. And that, of course, became an effective political weapon for Democrats, at least the ones who chose to wield it in the 2010 midterm elections. In April of last year, Ryan changed the title of his plan. He dumped the roadmap name and went with something maybe a little slower. This one is not a roadmap, but a path to prosperity. And it was only in this brand new version, the 2011 version of his plan, that he finally dropped the idea of privatizing Social Security. He kept the partial privatization of Medicare. He said to Ryan Lizza of The New Yorker that he had to compromise, that his original roadmap idea, quote, was just me unplugged. Well, now we are at today, day 3 of the Romney-Ryan ticket. And on day 3, here's how Mr. Romney has been trying to handle the hot potato subject of Paul Ryan unplugged, of his running mate's record. Mr. Romney has been trying to muddy the waters, trying to say that it's not his running mate who has proposed gutting Medicare. That's the other guy.
The president's idea, for instance, for Medicare was to cut it by $700 billion. That's not the right answer. We want to make sure that we preserve and protect Medicare.
The $700 billion cut for Medicare that the Republicans are very excited about, whatever you think about that as a cut, it is the same $700 cut that is in the Paul Ryan plan, which not only preserves those cuts, but also would turn it into a coupon program, privatizing Medicare and thereby getting rid of what we think of as Medicare. You cannot muddy the waters on Paul Ryan and Medicare. Killing Medicare is why Paul Ryan is famous at all. That is the thing he is known for. And you picked him knowing that. And if you pick the guy who really, in his heart of hearts, wants to privatize Social Security and privatize Medicare, no matter how much it costs politically or otherwise, if you pick that guy to be one heartbeat away from the presidency, then you have to answer for it. We'll have more on what Paul Ryan means for Medicare and Social Security with Jared Bernstein, who joins us next. The Republicans have picked as their vice presidential nominee the most visible proponent among congressional Democrats of the privatization of Social Security and the privatization of Medicare. What could possibly go wrong? Joining us now is Jared Bernstein. He's senior fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. He's also an MSNBC and CNBC contributor. Jared, it's nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Rachel.
The Republicans have decided that they are not going to answer questions about Paul Ryan's proposal to privatize Medicare. They're saying that's not Mitt Romney's proposal, it's just Paul Ryan's, and by the way, it's Obama who's going after Medicare. What do you make of their effort to make this President Obama's problem and not their own?
Well, I'm very happy to answer that question. The point you made earlier is the key one. The $700 billion in Medicare cuts that you just heard Mitt Romney complain about, that's been in the Paul Ryan budget for years now, and it still is. The difference is that President Obama, in the Affordable Care Act, takes those savings from Medicare and plows them back into helping 30+ million people get insurance coverage, whereas on the Republican side, in the Ryan plan, something Romney very much embraces, those resources, those cuts, $700 billion, same number, go to tax cuts primarily for the most wealthy. So it's big-time Robin Hood in reverse around a program that is critically important to seniors' retirement security.
One of the things that has the most political salience of the entire second George W. Bush term in office was, of course, his failed effort to privatize Social Security. We just played a clip of him just after the 2004 election where he got reelected, saying he intended to spend his political capital from that election on selling the American public on the privatization of Social Security. Paul Ryan was the guy in the House for the Republicans who was pushing for that same thing. One of the things I thought was interesting, though, is that in Paul Ryan's version of it, it would cost $2 trillion in government spending costs to move Social Security into a privatized system. Did he ever propose paying for that $2 trillion? Did he think that should just be deficit financed?
No, I mean, it was the very much the same kind of problem that we're seeing in the rest of his fiscal plan. I mean, why this guy has a reputation as a fiscal hawk is really beyond me. Because absolutely, I mean, one of the things that we first recognized when he trotted out the Social Security privatization is that the transition cost to these private accounts would have precisely the effects you suggested. And now that we're talking about Medicare, as we said earlier, if you're going to cut taxes to the tune of $9+ trillion, the Bush tax cuts plus the doubling down of the Romney-Ryan tax cuts over 10 years, and you're also going to increase defense spending, there's absolutely no way you can do that without jamming the budget deficit into the stratosphere. So same problem. And again, an underlying theme here of a real antipathy towards social insurance. That kind of a guaranteed benefit that's so important in Medicare, so important in Social Security, gone under this kind of privatization. Was
there any evidence during the Bush years when Mr. Ryan was in Congress, sort of a backbench member of Congress, but a rising star, one with a hot following in the conservative media even at that time? Was there any evidence of him being a fiscal hawk, being a deficit hawk during those years in terms of the way he voted?
No, I mean, it was all very ideological, sort of putting the numbers to Ayn Rand, I guess, or something like that. And, you know, the thing that I remember very vividly from the time of the privatization debate under George W. Bush was that it happened to occur during a down stock market. And that was really all it took to show people that this privatization gamble is just a terrible idea relative to the guaranteed benefits under Social Security. I mean, really, you're really talking about throwing the dice when you move to the voucher or the privatization on guaranteed benefits, and I don't think it's something that's going to fly with the public.
Jared Bernstein, Senior Fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Jared, thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Sure, Rachel.
All right. Remember all that talk about tax returns and how much certain Republican presidential candidates have paid over the last 10 years or so in taxes? Well, the Paul Ryan announcement certainly changed the course of that conversation, but definitely not in the way the Republican ticket intended it to. That's next.